Today, we are talking about how to create community and belonging in teams and groups. And I have a guest today who specializes in this, has a lot of experience doing this, Margaux Miller. So, welcome to our podcast today.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
So, Margaux is the director of community at Toptal, and she's leading the community for Toptal in over 80 countries. But you also notice she has a really powerful voice, a lovely voice, and she uses that as a voice actor as well. You're also a host and producer. You know exactly what we're doing here today.
Yeah,
So
it's part of the fun, part of the fun.
it's part of the fun. So what is it about community that gets you so passionate about it?
It's funny, I was just talking to someone else this morning about community, not a show, but just on a Zoom call. And I got really excited and passionate. So it's funny that right away you come with that, Ivna, because I think it's just community building in itself is such an exciting kind of career or job or function to be a part of, because everything that you're doing is meant to help other people feel more connected. And the more connected that other people feel, the more that they have this like sense of belonging between them, the happier they are typically, and the more engaged they are in the work they're doing or whatever it is that your community works towards. It makes them feel a part of something, which typically makes people a lot happier. And so to be able to do something every day that helps make people happier is like, it's the cheesiest thing to say like that, but it's like truly everything that we work toward is really positive. And so I think that's the biggest thing. And yes, we can get to stories of how community building can be really hard. And sometimes you're moderating tough blowups that happen in communities. And it's not always like just really fun stuff. But what we're working toward is always this really exciting goal that's consistently helping people find this sense of belonging and connect with other human beings.
Okay, so I'm curious. Did you have an experience early on where you were part of an amazing community and you decided, that's it, this is what I got to do from now onwards?
That's a great question. I've actually never been asked that before, but no, I don't think so. It wasn't like I didn't go to one event where it was super raw and everybody, and it just made me feel like I have to create this sense for everyone. I think women listening, you've been to a spin class or something and you come in and people are high-fiving you the minute you come in and you're part of this spin community, which is what it is, right? Someone's cultivated that experience so you all feel together. I didn't have that. And in fact, I sometimes didn't even love those over the top community in your face experiences. But when you think of building community as just the way that people move through your company or the way they interact with your brand and your products and things like that, however, people use community building in different ways for their companies. But I always did being part of a soccer team growing up, part of a group of people who were like, I was in a choir. You know, there were things when you were young, when you were a kid, that for sure you felt connected to that group of people because you had a shared purpose. You both loved playing soccer, you both loved singing, in these very like easy examples I'm giving. So I think when now it's actually more the other way around, where I look back now and go, wow, there's actually so many opportunities that I had where I felt like I belonged with a group of people. And that can be those simple examples. And I think a mark of a good community is that you can do that in subtle ways too, where it's not necessarily like an overly forced experience. But those can work really well too, depending what you're working toward.
Yeah, no, I think ideally, and you're going to talk a little bit about this, which is creating community in a team. If you're in a team, you have a team, you might as well transform it into a community, or at least bring a sense of community into it, because then you get that all that engagement in your team while you're doing work. So I think that's a great way of applying that as well. Not only of course, it's really important to have that sense of community is so powerful in sports and in music and in activities. I just wonder why there aren't more companies bringing this into the day-to-day work environment. But we're going to talk about that, so I'm excited.
Yeah, perfect. I'd love to dig in.
And you sound super confident. You look super confident. Has it always been like that? Have you always been this confident power lady or not? And have you ever experienced imposter syndrome?
That's such a good question, because I think often when we're looking at women in our careers, or men or women, but people that we look up to, and for women, sometimes it's other women in leadership. And we do see these like really strong personalities like I have and have always had. So to answer that part of the question, yes, I've always been this like really outspoken, confident person. However, when I did take on my first global role, so I had done provincial reach, state level reach, I had done city level before that kind of thing, it had built. When I jumped into the level of role I'm in now, where it truly was community, I did face that. I did face imposter syndrome. And it's interesting because before that, I didn't understand it. I literally would talk to people that said they had it, and I would say things like, I don't get it. Like, you're there for a reason. They've obviously picked you for a reason. Like, why would you just be confident? Just do it. Do what you've always done. I literally couldn't understand it totally. And it's because I have this big, bold personality. But when I faced that, absolutely, there was this, like, I sat in it. I struggled a little bit. I just worked really hard, maybe. And maybe that's not the right answer for everyone, to just push through and work really hard. But I thought to myself, I have to prove myself. I have to keep going to make sure that I'm filling these shoes that I'm afraid of filling. And then I think you realize everything I just said. You eventually, your mind catches up with where you're actually at and says, I can do this. They did pick me for a reason. But sometimes you have to sit in that yourself. So yeah, it was an interesting journey, and now it's like years in, and I can't believe I ever doubted it, and working on really exciting projects and really moving the dial on what we're working on. But yeah, I think it's really good to know that sometimes when you look at people that are really confident in these senior leadership roles, they may very well have felt it too, and it's really normal.
Did it take you a long time? Like, how long did it take you to get to that point where you're like, oh, okay, this makes sense for me to be here in this role?
For sure, months. Like, this was not a 2 weeks in, you go, oh, okay, I'm cool. Months for sure. Yeah.
Did it take months because is that the time that you needed to actually deliver something for the first time or get feedback, or did it spontaneously
Yes.
happen?
That's a good question. I don't know that I thought deep enough about it to put my finger right on it, but I think it's for sure multifaceted. There was a part of it of there was a lot to absorb at that level at first. So just like really taking it all in as someone who wants to act, that was hard in itself, to go, okay, wait, I actually do have things to learn first, while still finding those ways to feel like you're proving yourself. So that in itself is a hard balance to get a handle on. I think you could probably ask people in your company for tips about that. Hey, I still want to shine, but I realize I'm taking in a lot. Talk to your manager, talk to your peers, maybe whoever you're closest with, to say, like, how can I still navigate that and do that, those two things at the same time. And then, yeah, certainly just like enough time had gone by where we had to deliver some things and do presentations on what we were delivering. And then people's reactions, and when they're good enough or when they're really good, it helps you sit into it.
Interesting. All right. So there you go. It's possible to overcome imposter syndrome within a few months at least, but anyone, even confident people, experience it. So it's a very normal part of life and the experience for us. And
Yeah.
community. What is community? Let's start there.
Yeah, wonderful. The definition typically that we use for community is a group of individuals who share mutual concern for one another's welfare and or are working toward a shared goal. So a soccer team is working toward a shared goal because they all want to win, right? And they want to do it in a positive way without breaking the rules, all those things, right? There's this like very obvious path. With a company or a brand, it can be a little more difficult to pinpoint that in such an obvious way, but sharing mutual concern for one another's welfare, you might think not all colleagues necessarily care about each other, or not all product users care about one another, but they might have this like shared purpose they're working toward, which is, if it's a makeup brand, it could be they're all working toward a world where we have organic products and we all feel comfortable in our own skin using a product that makes us all feel really beautiful inside and out, kind of thing. So there's whatever that shared kind of destination is. It's that the whole group, the whole community sees that as the obvious kind of path toward it.
Okay, so those two elements, mutual concern about each other and shared goal. And the shared goal is usually defined by whoever's leading that community. That's you in your case. Is that right?
Sure. Yeah. Ultimately, your company values and or your kind of company mission should drive toward that in and of itself. It shouldn't necessarily, it's not like a marketing campaign where you reinvent it all the time. Like, it should be a very clear kind of path. But yeah, absolutely. And there's some features of healthy communities that are really common that we talk about in community building. And it's interesting because coming off the topic that you and I just had about imposter syndrome and kind of feeling like you belong somewhere, do you belong in that role? Do you belong in that workplace? That's really like the biggest thing we look at with community too. So another way you can define community is a space where people find a sense of belonging, right? And they find it because of those other things we said. They have mutual concern or a shared purpose. But when you have a community that shares mutual concern for each other, think of it like me and my workplace. Do we care about each other? Do we care about the same work being done in the same way? And sometimes you might find an environment that doesn't match you, and maybe then it's not right. So I love that the concepts of community building can apply to not necessarily a community, but to a team as well, like you noted earlier. Yeah, some of those principles of healthy communities are things like, do we share the same values? And that should be passed down from the company, right? Or from that brand. Is there a clear membership identity? Do we know what that looks like when we're a part of it? How should I act? What do I believe? Who am I within this group of people? Do I match it? A shared set of moral prescriptions. So like how members should behave and treat each other has to be shared for this to be a community that works, right? What do we tolerate or not? And then having insider understanding. So one of the great parts of being part of a community is that we don't have to explain ourselves so literally to be seen and understood and feel like we're part of it. If you find that group that gets you, that is your community, then you have that in and of itself. Like an easy example would be, think of like maybe a fantasy community, a chess community, a group of people who all love Dungeons and Dragons that are part of a community where they get together and they watch or play or interact or tell stories, right? It's that you don't have to explain what is that game. Do we all enjoy it in the same way? I don't understand what it is. Why would you be part of that? None of that exists, right? You automatically feel like you can be yourself, talk about that thing in a way that you are really passionate about without having to start at like square one of what is it, right? If you walk into a room full of those people or a community space online full of those people, you feel this sense of belonging right away. And when you have that insider understanding, it can help you make choices for your community, give them insider emotional understanding, and just have people really feel comfortable and that sense of belonging, which we're all striving to create in our communities and receive as a human being.
Yeah, we all want that. So these characteristics that you talked about, the sharing clear values, that clear membership identity, that prescription of interaction, and the insider understanding, how does that apply to a team? If you're a leader and you have a team and you want to bring this sense of community, is there anything different or anything change? Or is that something that you can apply directly with your team, for example?
Yeah, that's a good question. If you're managing a team and you want to treat it like a close-knit group of people and you want all these things I just said, right? You're listening to this saying like, yeah, if I had that with my team, that'd be awesome. We'd be way more connected to each other. But teams are a little more complex. They're not necessarily all chess lovers or all whatever. But if you're a team at a company, you should have shared values, matched up identity of what it means to work for that company. We can also have different personalities, but if you're all working at that place, you are all arguably striving toward the same goal, right? And for a community or a team to be like really tight, it's really essential that company or that sub-team goal is really clearly articulated, like a really clear set of values. I work at a company called Toptal, where I'm the director of community, as you mentioned before. And we are a fully remote company. So our staff of the company is in over 80 countries. And then what Toptal is a big talent marketplace. So it's the world's largest remote workforce. We were fully remote and never had offices before the pandemic, before all the changes, right? The reason I explain that is that if we did not have clear values and understanding of how we behave, what we accept, what we're working toward, there would be a miss with many of the teams, right? I've never seen a more productive workplace. And so to be saying that in a fully remote environment means that the executives of our company have understood that since we started and have really put in place this clarity on all of those kind of things that we just touched on. So within your team, what do you do in a literal sense with that? It's like continuously articulate the values, make sure everyone's on board with them and understands what they mean in real practice. So that could be as simple as, is our company really chill? And if you're 5 minutes late to a Zoom call because it's Zoom and you ran to the bathroom and you got a cup of coffee, like, is that fine? Or is that absolutely unacceptable? Because even though we're online, we have meeting times and I have another meeting after yours, and now every meeting is 5 minutes late. And that's not our culture. Our culture is prompt professionalism. That's a literal example that's like very easy to put into practice, right? To share with people. Another good example, like on the fun side of things, say you want your team to feel like they can share about their lives and not just work. If the culture that you want virtually, in this example, is to have people connect on personal levels too, then have a Slack channel or a Teams channel or whatever you use to communicate. Have it be just like the team fun channel or the team chatter. Call it chatter if fun's too loose for you. So team chatter. In that channel, only allow fun personal conversation. If someone in that channel says, hey, Margaux, cool picture, but actually, are you going to be gone this weekend because there's this project that you needed to do? And it looks like you're going to be like, by your pictures, you're not in the office anymore. I would write back to that person in the public chat that everyone could see. And I'd say, hey, Johnny, could you actually please put this in the time off channel or in the team? You probably don't have, maybe you don't have a time off channel, but you have a space where team just like work discussions happen, or private channels are where you discuss that kind of stuff. And this is maybe a rough example, but tell them that clearly, publicly, in a nice way, so that people know that channel is just for fun. Hey, so this is the right place for that kind of work discussion. But also, shout out to Margaux. I loved those pictures you just shared. Can't wait for next week. So you're keeping it light and fun. You're not like necessarily disciplining them, but you're owning what's happening in that community, in that channel, in that culture that you're trying to create. So sometimes as the manager or the leader, you do have to be that kind of like boundary setter, gatekeeper for reinforcing these values and that identity. And you can also go to that person in private or whatever you feel most comfortable with. But the idea of doing it in the public channel is sharing with everyone that you totally support that being fun, the fun space. Because if you don't, and say someone new joins your team, they see the fun chatter channel, but then they see a couple work comments, one like the one I just said, another one with some kind of document, that would be confusing for them. They won't know how to act, and therefore they won't act. They won't post personal pictures if they're unsure. Was Margaux just posting personal, but she wasn't supposed to? It was supposed to be business? Or was the business not what was supposed to be? You know what? I'm just not going to do it because I don't want to be that one who posts fun stuff when I'm supposed to be working and I'm going to get in trouble. So you've just ruined that like really positive space by not being brave enough to be that gatekeeper, that boundary setter.
That's so interesting. So that courage, because some people are scared of imposing those rules or think, it's inconsequential. I'll just let this one go, this one little thing go. I just want to make sure that everyone's happy, that individual is engaging. That's great, even though it's not the right engagement. And people might be scared to actually enforce those rules in a nice way, like you just exemplified. But you're right. It, like you said, it creates confusion, and confusion creates
inaction.
Yeah. And that's
or the wrong action, which is obvious, but it also creates inaction, which is almost worse. Because then that's hard to fight, right? You go, why is my team not posting? Is it because they're unhappy? Is it because they don't want to? Should I try and do something more forced fun? Should I do a mandatory coffee break on Friday? Should I do a whatever, right? It becomes more difficult.
Yeah. And I see that playing in, let's say, workshops and presentations where we have to give really clear rules of engagement. Otherwise, people don't participate, and everybody has to participate the same way at the right time.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the same, but it's more complex within a community because things are happening all the time in many different places.
Another thing you can do with that is a clear invitation to participate. I tell people this all the time, make it really obvious how that person should participate. So you could keep on that same example of the Slack channel or the team, whatever channel you use for team chatter, because if people are unsure and they see the mixed stuff, they're not going to participate. So what you can do is show them an example of how to participate, share your own photos in this example, post what you did on the weekend, show them that it's okay, that it's not just work product. Again, don't post anything that's not, right? Be that leader. But then also you can have a call to action in the top of the channel, right? Depending what tool you're using. If it's Slack, there's a description box and a topic box, and you can pin posts and bookmark stuff. So in all those places, you could have a description of how to use the channel. You could literally write a description that's short and sweet that says something like, this is for team chatter, period. Share your pictures, adventures, family stories. We want to get to know each other outside of work. You could literally make that the pinned thing everywhere. And then you could also put something, if you really want to be clear on how to participate, you could say something like, post anytime, anything that follows that guideline, or post anytime, anything you want to share about your personal experiences. so that it really allows you to know if you're new now and you go in there, maybe there's a confusing post someone hasn't tackled yet, but when you read that and it's so clear, that should be really helpful to keep you on the right path and understanding how to participate.
That's a great tip. So clarity and posting it in as many places as possible, and also role modeling the way.
Yep. And inviting them personally too. Like I could go on about this stuff forever if not, but like another great example is, say you have new team members every couple of weeks, like maybe things are really rolling, you're busy, you're that kind of department, or maybe it's not a new staff member. Maybe you open a book club channel because you're a big company, you're going to do a book club. So you open a channel. In the book club channel, you get people joining all the time because it's this big company with it's open to anyone. People come and go. Let's say this week, 5 people join. At the end of the week, tag all 5 people, or whenever you're free, do it in real time if you have the spare time, but otherwise call it once a week. Tag those people by name. Usually there's a way in your tool to tag people at Margaux, at Ivna, and go, hey, so happy you were able to join us for book club. This is how this channel works. 1, we pick a book from this list. You can find the list here. 2, we meet once a month. Since you're new here, I added the calendar invite to your calendar for you. 3, if you have new books to suggest, feel free to add them to the list I shared in item 1. 4, share any book recommendations you want. We're an open group and we want to hear what else you're reading. It doesn't have to be the book of the month. We want to hear about books. Do you think those 5 people are going to know what to do now and post and be way more engaged than if they just joined and went, can I post about other books? I have a book idea. Can I share it? Then they're DMing the leader of it. They're bugging them, whatever. And the rest of the people that have been there for a while, they don't care that you did 1 post a week tagging 5 people and telling them the rules. They probably forgot the rules half the time themselves because they were off for 2 months and now they're back for book club. So be that leader, show people how to participate. Consistency is key, like all the things we just talked about. But it's funny because these seem really obvious, but go look at your channels and the way you're engaging. And I bet you that you or your team have made some of these mistakes along the way. And it's hard, we're all busy, but good refresher, I guess, here in this conversation.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing from you is, if you're leading one of these groups, you really need to over communicate. There isn't too much communicating how to engage, how to interact, because I also imagine that people are most active in the beginning as soon as they join. Like that's the time to hook them in and get them participating, engaging, and fully getting that sense of belonging so that they can continue and welcome others. Because if you miss that, then it's hard to capture them back.
Yeah, that's great timing to do it for sure. Yeah.
So what about the belonging piece? Because you talked about the belonging, and I thought that was really, really insightful. So are there any mistakes that need to be avoided? Make sure that it doesn't hurt the belonging in the community, since it's so important.
Yeah, that's a good question. Definitely there is an issue that can come up, which is of kind of a crisis of belonging, which can happen. That tends to happen if, certainly, like to some of your points, like if it's done wrong when people join a new group. It would happen if a member essentially doesn't believe that they belong there. And so that can happen in many ways. Like a lot of people, again, these days are building community virtually. So it'd be akin to if in person you enter a room and there's no one in that room, likely you're going to turn around and leave. Or if you enter a room and you're full of energy and so excited to be there and you're talking really loud, like I probably do, and then everyone in the room is extremely quiet and you've now just come in really rambunctious. Oh no, like now you feel uncomfortable. In both those scenarios, you probably walk out of the room and you leave and you don't necessarily come back very fast. Online, same concept. If you walk into an empty room, an empty chat space with no clear instruction, no clear like welcoming, you don't see other people like you chatting in there, it's unclear. The same experience will likely happen, right? Where you don't feel like you belong there. The really like sad part of it when that happens is that people in that community will feel either lonely or convinced they don't belong there and they won't come back very fast, which obviously you lose, your company, your brand, your community loses in that case, right? Because maybe this person really was a fit, but you didn't get a chance to show them how they were a fit. Really, like the solution to that is what we were just talking about. It's extend invitations. It can be an invitation to an event or a gathering, but also one-on-one time. Maybe you have a program where people can meet peer-to-peer. That could be like mentorship, or that could be like a welcome program. Think of when you joined university ages ago, and you have those people who like show you around campus in the first week or day, right? They're like your campus buddy. It's very American movie if we're talking about that example, but the person who shows you around, brings you to the party in the first week, all that stuff. You could have that in your company. You could have a virtual version of that, or you have whether in person or virtual, you get a buddy system, right? You assign someone to that person who's got like a similar background, similar interests, or similar department. However you decide you want to match. You could even match on numerous criteria sets if you have the capacity. And so it really allow them to find that new person, to find where they belong in your community, because that person can guide them to the different stops of where they might sit, where they might stop and belong, the different doorways in the example I'm giving. So yeah, really inviting others to connect with the right people really allows them to feel like they can plant themselves really firmly in your community, and not feel like when they're trying to participate that they could get rejected because they've had someone guiding them along the way. So that invitation becomes evidence for them that they belong there. And it can literally be as simple as, yeah, you can post your fun pictures here. Actually, please do. We'd love to get to know you because you're new, right? Like it could be that easy. And again, it doesn't have to be new. That's just the example I'm using, but it could be like they've been there forever, but they're joining the new chess group or the new, book club. Give them that evidence, and then they'll know, oh, I read books too. I must belong here. I don't have to be an executive who reads the fanciest books or reading a different language or whatever. Like it's just me reading a book. I still belong here.
Yeah, so having that direct approach, even one-on-one, saying, hey, here's an opportunity for you. Here's an event. Here's what you can do. It's a very direct way of communicating so that people know exactly what to do and that they don't feel like they're alone, or like you said, they're being rejected or anything like that. And what's the storytelling part to the whole community building process?
Gosh, storytelling is always important. I think we all can use it in our careers and in our businesses in different ways. In community, we really try and use storytelling. In our case, we have members of our community, or we've got talent in our community, we call them. But we tell stories of how members or future members can have really used and leveraged the values that we see in our community. It's important even for outsiders, like people outside the community, to know those values and to see the stories of our community. We do that in different ways. We last year, for example, Toptal sponsored the Women in Tech Lounge at Web Summit. And so Web Summit is a huge conference, like almost 80,000 people in Lisbon. And on the stage, we had a group of our female developer, designer, and product manager. We had one of each, female talent in our freelance network, in our talent marketplace. And they told their stories of what it was like to move into the lifestyle of being an on-demand workforce, being what you'd maybe understand as a contractor or a freelancer, and what freedoms that gave them as a woman in the industry. A lot of women in tech face challenges with being a minority in their departments, like in departments with many men, often in the tech departments. And even for designers too, same thing. And project managers working in tech that are women, like they all faced it, these different women in these different roles. And they told their stories, which really resonated with the group in the audience at Web Summit. But I've retold some of the examples that they gave that day, stories like being able to pick when they wanted to be part of the conversation of being a woman in tech, as opposed to just focusing on their work that day. It was easier for them when they were in a remote environment to do those things, because they weren't necessarily thrown into an environment where it was so visibly obvious. So it allowed them to focus on their work when they wanted to, and to be someone at the forefront of that discussion when they wanted to. And they found they really were able to deliver more and do better. And when women in tech is a passionate topic of mine that I can get into totally separately, but sticking with community today and storytelling, it's like those stories then allow people to say, okay, hey, if I was part of the Toptal community, if I went through their screening to become a talent in that network, I could access the same things those women are talking about. I could have a fully remote lifestyle. I could work from anywhere, but it could benefit me as a mother. It could benefit me as someone who has struggled with being in an all-male physical environment around me, whatever that might be. That's just their example in this case here. But that storytelling allowed our existing talent that were up there with us to be able to tell their stories and feel really like proud of being part of our organization and part of our community, Also allowed outsiders, people who are not yet in the network, to understand like what the value was of them joining the network, the value from that perspective. Again, of course, there's different values, and so really like that built connection between those women on the stage, between them and the women in the audience, and between anyone else who watched the recording and saw it afterwards. So it's just personal stories like that really resonate. I can sit here all day and say, it's a great network. We hire the top 3% of talent and you can work from anywhere. But like when you hear a story of someone that you can really relate to that says, I didn't have a commute anymore. So I could pick up my kids. I could have my kids at the daycare down the street and get them right at 4 when I was done from home, going over whatever it was. Like, and it really, that resonates way more with those tangible examples that you can relate to.
And I think what happens then when the women in the audience hear those stories from those women who experience that and those benefits, then they start to be able to talk about it with the people who are speaking, but talk about it with anyone who was in the audience as well, and not feel like that they're in some strange territory that they shouldn't be talking about.
Right.
So it encourages a lot of conversation after that.
Yeah. And the other thing, just to really drive the nail into the wood here, it gives them a sense of belonging, right? Not only with each other, like you just said, the audience and the speakers, but also that they could belong in our network. That the Toptal network, that's a ton of tech people that are the top percent in the world. Oh, they look like me. They're a woman like me. In this example, we have many men in our network, but that's maybe the misconception, right? Like a lot of young women in tech might look at our organization or look at like a group of freelancers somewhere and say, they're probably all tech developer men and I don't belong there. It shows them that actually they belong with each other, but also that they have that right and that deserved place in our community, in our network as well. And you see it, you hear it, and it really drives home that sense of belonging that, yeah, you do also belong in the Toptal network. You all do.
It all comes back to belonging. I love it. I love it. So yes. What is something what are some of the tips for the members? So if you're a member and you join a community, how can you get the most out of the community? How can you really be the best community member? What are some of the characteristics of the community members that you've seen that are like top, that really help out a lot and that are getting the most out of the opportunity?
Yeah. We have such a great community, and we're lucky that we have a community leadership program. So we run a program where people within our community can step up and be community leaders. And so they volunteer their time to support the broader community. Likely, if you think of it in this way of supporting a micro community, whether that's based on a skill or interest you have. So we can go back and use some examples, like maybe someone's the chess club leader, right? And they run chess tournaments once every quarter or whatever. They bring together this community of around the world, people that love chess. Or you could have a community of by region. So there's leaders that we have who run events we have a Geo Nigeria leader, we have a Geo Canada leader, and then we break that down even more granular. We might have like Geo Canada Toronto, right? And so we have a leader in Toronto. But whatever that might be all over the world, it allows these people to really make great connections, give back, be in a leadership role. It's a lot of things like that. But what it does at the same time is it allows them to really get that insider information from us that they then can pass on. So it's like a one-to-many kind of strategy where they get the insider information up front. That's exciting, right? To be in the know. And they can then support their community even more greatly. If in a certain country they need something from us, or they want to get together and do something because they haven't in a while, there's been things going on, they're like empowered to do that. So it allows like smaller pockets to really feel connected. It's really going to be hard for you to have a strategy that works across the entire world with no customization, right? We just are all so different everywhere. We're all humans at the end of the day. There are totally consistent things you can do. But when you have these leaders, it allows them to like voice things from the perspective of a smaller group, run events that really work for that smaller group. So there's a lot of that tailoring that can happen. So those people obviously are an asset to our community, and every community, like I've seen many communities leverage leaders, ambassadors, moderators, whatever they might call them, in really strong ways. But if you're an individual in a community and you aren't necessarily ready to take on that role, but you want to be a contributing community member, I would say speak up, ask questions. So often the community team works really hard to put into place major programming that many people don't realize exists. And so if they get asked the question of, hey, I want to participate more, I just want to know what's available to me. That's a great question. We want to tell you that, because so often community leaders are like driving it home going, you can do this and you can do this and you can do this. Please, we want you to connect. But they're bombarded. Everyone, we're bombarded with so much information nowadays. It's so easy to miss those things. So really good communities have those like at the forefront, but sometimes you're battling other priorities within the organization. And so the advice for the members of the community is dig around for a second, try and find them, but feel free to ask, because we want to share those amazing opportunities that community offers with you. And that's how you can really be a good community member. And then reshare that, right? If you learned about something cool, bring someone with you, because probably they're wondering the same thing you were before you got that information.
Very nice. Yeah, I was thinking about that one. Bring people with you.
Yeah.
Any last tips or considerations around the whole community part in building and participation?
I think we covered so much. I think that there's principles of community building and belonging that you can look up if you want to learn more about this. There's a lot of great books on community building and gathering groups of people, and just bug me on LinkedIn and I'm happy to share those resources if you get specific about what you're looking to grow on in this topic. And I'm really happy to share more in other avenues if people need or are interested.
I'm excited now to build a community of some sort. I love it. So where can the listeners find you?
Yeah, please. I'm on LinkedIn, so it's Margaux Miller. I'm sure you'll share my name, Ivna, around. Also on most social platforms, I'm Margaux A. Miller. There's an A in the middle, but my name's spelled funny. Check it out. I'm sure Ivna will have it everywhere. If you have events coming up, you want to talk about community, you just let me know. I'm happy to be there or to chat with you virtually. But yeah, definitely all social platforms, certainly Instagram and LinkedIn are my biggest ones. So find me, Margaux Miller, and happy to chat community with you for far too long. Clearly it's something I'm passionate about.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Margaux.
Thank you for having me.